Indus Valley Civilization, also known as Harappan Civilization, and Sindhu-Saraswati Civilization. This is one of the oldest civilizations in the ancient world. This civilization is contemporary to the Mesopotamian civilization in West Asia and Nile River Valley civilization in Egypt. This civilization, along with the other rest of the two civilizations, is called as Bronze Age civilizations because for the first time people started using bronze extensively for different economic activities. They started making tools out of bronze. They also started making jewelry. Because of extensive use of bronze, these civilizations were called as Bronze Age civilization. Indus Valley civilization is also called as a proto-historic civilization because the script that is used for that is associated with Harappan civilization is not deciphered yet, so it's also called as a proto-historic civilization. Now Mesopotamian civilization script is deciphered, so is the case with Nile Valley civilization script. So these two civilizations are considered as historic civilization, whereas Harappan civilization or Indus Valley civilization is called as a proto-historic civilization. Now we see different terms that are used to identify this particular civilization. So we have Harappan civilization, Indus Valley civilization, or Sindhu-Saraswati civilization. Harappan civilization is the term used for this civilization because Harappa was the first site that was discovered that belonged to this particular civilization. And also most of the sites that belong to this particular civilization falls on the Indus Valley civilization. So it is often considered as Indus Valley civilization. And it's also called a Sindhu-Saraswati civilization by many historians, and that's because some of the sites also falls on the Saraswati river. Now this Saraswati river is now extinct, but there was a time when there was a river called Saraswati, and we have some historical evidences to support that argument. So many historians believe that this civilization can be also called as Sindhu-Saraswati civilization. So all in all, these different terms like Harappan civilization, Indus Valley civilization, and Sindhu-Saraswati civilization, these terms are used simultaneously. So if you look at the area in which this civilization existed, these sites belong to present day North Pakistan mostly, and parts of India, and also parts of Afghanistan. So it's on the northwestern part of Indian subcontinent. And there are different places that or different sites that belong to this particular civilization. These includes Rahman Dheri, Nausharo, Pathani Damb, Shotugai, Dholabira. So these are different sites that falls into the category of Harappan civilization. So this creates a kind of curiosity about why these different places are categorized as a part of the civilization, and why these places are not part of any culture, because we know that in Chalcolithic age there were different cultures that existed in Indian subcontinent, especially on the northwestern part of Indian subcontinent. So how can we say that these sites do not belong to any culture but they belong to the Harappan civilization? So for that we have to understand that there are certain characteristics of Harappan civilization, and if a particular site meet these characteristics, this particular they will be considered as a part of the civilization. And the most important aspect or most important category on the basis of which we can recognize a place as a part of Harappan civilization is their use of bricks. So Harappan people had standard bricks. These bricks were of 4:2:1 measurement, and from all the different sites that belong to Harappan civilization, we see these bricks in use. So they used these bricks to build households. They also used these bricks to build their drainage pattern, their public monuments, and their public bath wells. So the use of these bricks was extensive. So this is one characteristics or one special feature of Harappan cities, and also other semi-urban sites of Harappan civilization. So the second important characteristics of Harappan sites is the use of bronze. So bronze was used extensively to make tools, weapons, and also for jewelry making. So this is another characteristics of Harappan civilization. And third important characteristics of Harappan civilization is the pottery. They made extensive potteries, and these potteries. The fourth important characteristics of Harappan cities is the beads. Harappan people were fond of jewelries, and they used to make different kind of jewelries out of beads. And these beads were made of terracotta, semi-precious stones, precious metal, and also sometimes by using bone in some instances. So different kind of elements or different kind of materials were used to make these beads, and jewelries made of these beads were well known. And Harappan civilization is also Harappan civilization was also trading in these beads. So these are the main characteristics on the basis of which we can identify a particular site as a part of the Harappan civilization. Another characteristics of Harappan civilization is the use of script. They had a unique script, and throughout the different sites, we find evidence or remains of this script on the seals, ceilings, goods such as pottery and jewelry, and also in one instance on a signboard we have found this particular script written on it. So on the basis of these uniform characteristics, we identify the Harappan sites. Now, if we look at the time period, like when exactly the Harappan civilization was in existence. Harappan civilization came into existence in around 2600 BC as in its mature form. And in its mature form, it lasted till around 1900 BC. The civilization started coming to an end by 1750 BC. So this was the time period of Harappan civilization. Now, there are questions about the origin of Harappan civilization, like what led to the creation or what led to the beginning of Harappan civilization. So there are many different theories about to explain its origin. So one historian, Jim G. Schaffer, compares Harappan civilization with Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamian civilization is also a Bronze civilization, and this civilization was a little bit older to Harappan civilization but otherwise contemporary. Now it was argued that because the people in Mesopotamia were also using bricks and they were also using bronze, so perhaps actually some people who migrated from Mesopotamia to the Indus region, and they started building an civilization. So this is one view. Another view says that John Marshall, who says that civilization originated in Indian subcontinent, and we find similarities in culture and material remains with other settlements from the rest of Indian subcontinent. So that leads to the opinion that the Harappan civilization originated locally. There is another opinion which is very similar to what Jim G. Schaffer has argued, that either migration of people or migration of ideas from Mesopotamian civilization that led to the creation of Indus Valley civilization. And there are many supporters of this argument. So E. J. McKay, D. H. Gordon, and K. N. Kramer believes that people migrated from Mesopotamian civilization and created Indus Valley civilization. However, Mortimer Wheeler believes that it was not people, but it was the migration of ideas from Mesopotamian civilization to Indus Valley civilization that had led to the creation of Indus Valley civilization. However, these views are not accepted globally or universally because there are some inherent differences in the material life of Harappan people and people who lived in Mesopotamian civilization. One important difference between these two civilizations is the quality of bronze. So the ratio of mixing copper and tin is quite different in the bronze that is available from Indus Valley region and the bronze that is available from Mesopotamian civilization. Another important difference between these two civilizations is the use of brick. So the ratio that was used by Harappan people for making their bricks was not similar with that of Mesopotamian civilization. Also, Mesopotamian people did not follow town planning, even though both these civilizations were urban civilization. That means people lived in cities and there were existence of cities, but we do not see the use of similar kind of town planning or town planning at all in case of Mesopotamian civilization. The major sites discovered from Harappan civilization includes Mohenjo-daro, Chanhu-daro, Harappa, Kalibangan, Rakhi Garhi, Dholabira, and many more. So if we look at the major sites, from Mohenjo-daro we have found the Great Bath, the Great Granary, the College of Priests, Assembly Hall, several public wells. In fact, more than 700 public wells have been found, and also a statue of a man, and this statue is in a broken stage and it is often called as the statue of the priest king. So besides Mohenjo-daro, other significant sites include Chanhu-daro. Chanhu-daro was a factory site, and from here we have found several finished and unfinished beads. Two large brick-made drains have also been found. Harappa is the first site that was unearthed, and from Harappa we have found a threshing place on a mortar. So perhaps that was a place where they used to thresh their grains. Kalibangan is another important site that belonged to Harappan civilization. From Kalibangan, we have found beads and other jewelries. Other notable discoveries include fire altars and burials. From Banwali and Rakhi Garhi also, we have found fire altars. Lothal is a very significant place because here we have found a unique structure which is called as the dockyard. There are other opinions as well to identify this particular dockyard. However, the consensus is on the argument that it was a dockyard where vessels used to reach and load and unload their merchandise. Dholabira on the coast of Gujarat is another important city that belonged to Harappan civilization. Dholabira had some unique findings that includes a signboard, and we also find some traces of water harvesting system from Dholabira. And Aladinho is another site which now falls in Pakistan, and this particular site carries a hoard of jewelry which includes gold jewelries as well. So these are some important findings or some important sites that belong to the Harappan civilization. However, there are many other sites which are smaller and they also carry characteristics of Harappan civilization. These includes Alamgirpur, which is the easternmost site that so far, and this particular city belongs to now it falls in Uttar Pradesh in India. Daimabad is another site which is often considered as the southernmost site. Banda, which is now in present-day Kashmir, is the northernmost site, and Sutka Gandor, which is now in Pakistan, is considered as the westernmost site of Harappan civilization. And this civilization, when we look at the time period, like the mature phase was from around 2600 to 1900 BC. So this was the time when there were many other Chalcolithic cultures that were in existence. There were many people, especially on the Himalayan foothills and in Kashmir, who lived like hunter-gatherers or whose lifestyle correspond to the Neolithic age. So we can say that Harappan civilization was contemporary to many Chalcolithic cultures and many hunting-gathering communities in the Indian subcontinent. Now, if you look at their economy, like what was their subsistence or how this emerged to become such an influential or such a glorious civilized phase. So, agriculture was their mainstay. So, they continued to grow food just like the Neolithic people or Chalcolithic people. They consume different kind of grains, food grains like wheat, rice, barley. They also had different kind of nuts and seeds as a part of their diet, and they followed Kharif and Rabi seasons for doing their agricultural activities. And they were also dependent on hunting gathering. So there were also instances when they used to consume meat and fish, and most probably they were dependent on the neighboring hunting gathering communities for this kind of food supply. Trade was an important part of Harappan economy. They were doing trade internally amongst the cities, and they were also engaged in long distance trade with places such as Mesopotamian civilization, Persian Gulf, Central Asia, and they used to export their goods in the form of beads and jewelry. They were also engaged in seal making, pottery making, bricks and terracotta works, and metal works. And at the same time, while doing these different craft work, they were dependent on neighboring communities and other civilizations for raw material. So they used to import copper, zinc, and lead from Rajasthan. Gold was imported from Kolar, which is now in Karnataka, tin from Haryana, Central Asia, and also from Afghanistan. And they used to import lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and some semi-precious stones from Gujarat. Harappans were trading with contemporary people, whether they belong to Neolithic age or Chalcolithic cultures. They also traded with Mesopotamian civilization, Persian Gulf, and Central Asia. However, in long-distance trade, Harappans were not dependent on these trading partners for their sustenance. So actually, it was the Harappans who were exporting most of the commodities, and they were importing some of the raw materials that they needed. So basically, in economy, it seems that Harappans were, despite their urban nature and emphasis on economic activities in the form of trade, they were still to a large extent dependent on their internal resources for carrying on their economic activities. Now, if we look at their social life on the basis of the material remains, the archaeological sources, what we can say is that Harappan society was more or less egalitarian. That means there was not major differences in their income or in their like sustenance or their occupations, because we have some information about different occupations, like some of them were engaged in agricultural activities, some in trade, some in craft work, and they were actually very specialized in their craft work. Despite all that, if we look at the housing settlements, these were more or less of similar size, except in some instances. For example, from Harappa and Dholabira, we have found some houses that shows that some people lived in bigger houses and some people lived in smaller houses. But in general, there was no major difference in their occupational standard or in their habitations. And they also used more or less similar kind of pottery. From on the basis of pottery remains, we can assume that they were using similar kind of pottery irrespective of their social status or economic status. So we can say that society was to a large extent egalitarian. They were also superstitious, which can be assumed or which can be concluded on the basis of material remains in the form of terracotta figurines of mother goddess, some seals on which we see the impression of a deity. This deity is often called as Pashupati or horn deity. And we have also seen use of amulets. So all this indicates that they were superstitious, they had some kind of religious beliefs as well. And a part of their religious beliefs is also reflected in their burial practices. So the Harappans, they buried their dead typically in a north to south position. Sometimes they also followed pit burial, and in some instances we have also seen symbolic burials. Fractional burials and urn burials were also visible. So these are different kind of burial practices they followed. Harappans also did fire worship, which is evident from the remains of fire altars. So all this indicates the social life of Harappan people. The Harappan civilization came to an end by around 1750 BC. And there are different opinions regarding their disappearance, like why Harappan civilization came to an end. There are opinions such as frequent flooding in the city of Mohenjo-daro, shift in the course of rivers such as the Indus River, and the drying up of Khaggar-Hakra river channel. Another opinion that is put forwarded by some historians, that they believe that Aryan invasion led to the decline of Harappan civilization. However, none of these theories can conclusively prove that the Harappan civilization declined because of these reasons. So the opinion, the most accepted or well accepted opinion is that Harappan civilization declined because of changes in the ecology or ecological imbalances. These ecological imbalances happened due to flood, overgrazing of Himalayan foothills, which also resulted in flooding, dearth of fuel to carry on craftswork, and mismanagement of resources. All these factors together played an important role in the gradual decline of Harappan urban phase and eventually decline of Harappan civilization.